Today's passage is from First Chronicles, chapter 28, verses 9 and 10. First Chronicles 28, 9 and 10. And you, my son Solomon, acknowledge the God of your father and serve him with wholehearted devotion and with a willing mind. For the Lord searches every heart and understands every motive behind the thoughts. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a temple as a sanctuary. Be strong and do the work. I want to begin today with another edition of Brian's Bad Jokes. I want to tell you a joke about success. There was once a man celebrating his 100th birthday. And at the celebration, many people kept coming up to him and saying how athletic and well-preserved he looked. And they kept asking for the secret of his success. Well, finally, the man stood up and he said, "Friends, I will tell you the secret to my success. Every day, rain, shine, or snow, for the last 75 years, I have taken a walk for 20 minutes out in the open air." People were impressed by his dedication. And he said, "How did you maintain this regime for such a long time?" The man said, "Well, I married my wife 75 years ago, and on our wedding night, we made a solemn vow that if ever we had a fight, whoever was proved wrong would take a walk that night." Okay, obviously that's a joke, but success is important to us. We care about being successful. We want to be a success. So I want to talk a little bit about success today. I think when we hear the word success, we normally think of monetary success. We think about success in terms of finances. But I think we know that success goes beyond that. So I'd like to talk about a deeper level of success. Specifically, I'd like to talk about what it means to be a success as a Christian. Webster's Dictionary defines success as the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So success is to complete a goal. It is to do what we set out to do. This leads us right to the question of what it means to be a success as Christians. I think often when Christians think of success, they think that success as a Christian means that you get a ticket to heaven. If I make it to heaven, I am a success, and it doesn't really matter what happens prior to that. But I think that success as a Christian goes beyond that. Because we can make it to heaven and still be fundamentally failures as Christians. Because we can survive, but we survive as someone running out of a burning building. We live, we're saved, but little more than that. I like to look at success as a Christian beyond simply escaping through fire. So I like to talk about success of more than just surviving. Rather, when we talk about success as a Christian, I'm talking about our influence in the world around us. A successful Christian lifts others up. A successful Christian points people to Jesus Christ. A successful Christian shows compassion and love and kindness to others. I want to talk about how we can be successful Christians. Really, today's passage is all about success. The last 28 chapters of First Chronicles are about David's preparation for his son Solomon to be a success. Solomon had been charged by David to build a temple to the Lord. And so, as David gave this charge, he also wanted Solomon to be successful in this undertaking. And so these chapters tell us how David prepared Solomon to be a success. Because success comes from preparation. I think a lot of you know that I am a Purdue Boilermakers fan. I have been my whole life, even during some pretty dark years. I'm never going to give it up. But saying that, I will begrudgingly admit that the IU coach, Bobby Knight, coached IU basketball from 71 to 2000, was one of the greatest basketball coaches in history. And Bobby Knight had some useful words to say about success. Knight said, "The will to win is not nearly as important as the will to prepare to win." That is true in every area of life. It's true of basketball. It's true of building a temple, and it's true of our Christian lives. Success comes from preparation. It is the will to prepare for success that really matters. And in today's passage, David tells us 4 things about how we can prepare for success. So today I want to talk about preparing for that success. First, David says that a successful Christian knows God. That's how David begins this passage. His first words to Solomon, his charge to build this temple, are, "Know the Lord. Acknowledge the God of your father." That is the first step to success in building the temple. That's the first step in success in the Christian life. Know God. Okay, that seems pretty obvious to me. If we're going to be successful Christians, let's start with knowing God. So I just have a couple other things I want to say about this. First, knowing God is different from knowing about God. We are curious creatures by nature. We like to know about things. But knowing about God, having all the facts and figures about God, are not the same thing as knowing God. I assume you've all heard the famous legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. In the original legend, Arthur's bravest knight, Sir Lancelot, and his wife, Guinevere, had an affair. And it destroyed the kingdom and led to the end of Camelot. And after it was over, Guinevere and Lancelot recognized their part in the fall of Camelot. Lancelot went off to do good deeds throughout the world, hoping he could atone for his past sins. Guinevere became a nun. The last words in the original story of King Arthur that were written about Guinevere is this: "She became famous for her skill in theology and cared nothing for God." That's the difference between knowing God and knowing about God. This world can celebrate people who know about God, who have all kinds of information, but that doesn't mean we know God. If we're going to be a success as Christians, we need to know God personally. Second, knowing God is not in the past tense. It's not something that we did that one time. It's not a task we complete. We know God through continued prayer and Bible study and meditation and worship with other Christians. It comes from spending time with God. So if we want to be a success as Christians, it all has to start with knowing God. So first, successful Christians know God. Second, God gives us everything we need to be successful Christians. This is a big part of the last 28 chapters in First Chronicles. They tell how David gave Solomon everything he needed to be a success. It records how David assigned military troops to guard the temple. It talks about the priests that David hired to ensure that the building of the temple would follow God's regulations. It talks about the singers and performers that David brought in to celebrate the dedication of the temple. And it talks about the final charge that David gave to Solomon in building this temple. It talks about how David gave everything Solomon needed to be a success. And so today, God gives us what we need to be a success. Probably my favorite demonstration of this comes in the 25th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the parable of the talents. In that parable, a king was going away for a long time, and he called 3 servants to him. And he gave them each some money. He gave the first servant 25 talents, gave the first servant 5 talents, the second servant 2 talents, and the third servant 1 talent. A talent's a measure of silver, about 75 pounds, and it would be worth about $700,000. And then the king went away, and he returned later, and he rewarded each servant according to what they had done with the money he had left them. And he punished the one servant who did nothing with that money. And what I want to really bring out of that parable is that the king is the one who gave the people their talents. He was the one who gave them what they needed to be a success right from the start. Still today, God is the one who gives us what we need to be successful. He gives us everything we need to be successful Christians. That's worth remembering that in that parable, the servants did not all get the same thing. They were all given the same amount of money. One servant got 5 talents, another got 2 talents, another servant got 1 talent. But then the king judged them according to what they did with what he had given them. The first servant, who was given 5 talents, earned 5 more talents. And the king said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come join in your master's happiness." The second servant, who was given 2 talents, earned 2 more talents. Now, if you judge that just by the amount of money earned, the first servant earned more than twice as much as the second servant. But the king said the exact same thing to the second servant as he said to the first servant. "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come join in your master's happiness." The king judged each servant based on what he had given them. So today, God calls us to be a success based on what he has given us. Because we not all start equal in life. We not all have the same talents. We are not given the same resources or the same opportunities. This world is not equal and it is not fair. But God treats us according to what he has given us. He has given us what we need to be a success as Christians. He doesn't ask, what did you do compared to this other guy? He doesn't say, did Christian DeArmond do as much with his life as Richie Lindemood did? Rather, he says, have you done the best that you can with what I have given you? And God gives us what we need to be successes as Christians. So first, successful Christians know God. And second, God gives us everything we need to be successful Christians. The slide, really. It's okay. Oh, did I skip one? I guess I skipped one. You can go back. I was moving you too far ahead. Successful second. Third, successful Christians have a plan. That is probably the biggest part of today's passage. Throughout this lengthy passage, 8 chapters, we're given detailed information about the plan David had for Solomon to be successful. David did not just say to Solomon, I charge you to build this temple, and then leave it at that. He gave Solomon a plan. So today, successful Christians make a plan. Now, sometimes things just fall into place. God is at work. When we put our faith in him, he does things we could never imagine to even try. When we are open and receptive to his work, that he leads us where he wants us to go. But even then, successful Christians have a plan. It is when we recognize an opportunity and we create a plan to do the best that we can, that we are successes as Christians. I think far too often Christians use phrases like have faith or let go and let God as an excuse to avoid the work of making a good plan in God. Certainly we should have faith. We should trust in the Lord, for he is the one at work. But he calls us to be at work in him. He calls us to make a plan. God will not reward laziness. God cannot reward a slothful Christian the same way he rewards an active Christian. He calls us to the work of making a solid plan. And this kind of leads me right into my last point for today. That is, successful Christians persevere. The final command that David gave King Solomon in this passage was, be strong and do the work. So today, God says to us, be strong and do the work. Persevere. Cell phone. This is actually Leanne's cell phone, but couldn't find mine. I lose it a lot. Me too. So, just this week I was talking with a guy about what life was like before we had cell phones and trying to drive and find places. I was bad at it. Now, I am just old enough to remember life as an adult before the internet. And we actually had to know where things were, or we had to get a map and be able to read it. It's not true anymore. Nowadays, you just pick up your phone and you hit a button and it'll tell you how to get anywhere you want to go. It'll give you the turns and the street names and the speed limit. But there are limits to what this can do. Let me give you a demonstration. Directions to New York City. Thank you. Okay, I now have directions to New York City on my phone. An observant person here might notice, while I am looking at a map to New York City, I'm not any closer to New York City than I was when I pulled the phone out of my pocket. Oops, I dropped the phone. A cell phone can tell me how to get to New York City. It can't move me to New York City. In Christian life, knowing God, reading the Bible, having a plan, trusting that God has given us what we need to exceed is all very important, but on its own, it doesn't bring success. We have to actually get out and do the work that God has called us to. We need to persevere. I'd like to close today's sermon by reading what another preacher, Charles Swindoll, said on this topic. Swindoll said, Bible instruction alone will not result in instant solution to problems. No matter how reliable or gifted the teacher, no, the declaration of truth does not provide the removal of difficulties. Think of Scripture as an absolutely accurate map. A map tells you how to get to a certain destination. But just looking at a map won't automatically transport you to Arizona or England or Peru. Getting to those places means you have to make the effort, pay the cost, take the time to travel, stay at it until you arrive. In a word, persevere. So it is in the Christian life. God's map is reliable and available. It is also clear and direct. But there's no hocus pocus in its pages that automatically sends its reader by way of magic carpet. Please don't misunderstand. I love God's word. I am more convinced than ever in my life that His trustworthy truths are inestimable, invaluable, in value. But although the Bible may be a trustworthy book, it is certainly no magic potion that you rub on yourself 3 times a day to chase away the devil. Nor is it something that you take internally with a pious promise to God, hoping the next morning that you will suddenly know and experience all of its truths. There is no such thing as instant maturity on this earth. God does not offer a formula that produces fully mature Christians overnight. Christian growth comes through hardcore, gutsy perseverance and applying what you hear and obeying it, and thereby learning how to handle those inevitable problems. Successful Christians persevere. This is what David said about success. Successful Christians know God. Successful Christians recognize that God has given us everything we need to succeed. And successful Christians have a plan, and we persevere. And when we do these things, when we persevere in what God has given us, then we have an influence on the world around us. Then we lift others up. Then we point people to the living God who saves. Then we can show compassion. Then we can bring light into a dark world. God has given us what we need to be successful. Now He calls us to persevere. In a moment, we're going to stand for invitation hymn. And as we stand to sing, if you look at your life and saying, I've been anything but successful as a Christian, I've been focused on my own things, I've been focused on my own selfish desires, I have not sought to be a Christian who influences this world, and you desire to see that change in your life, you have an opportunity today. As you'll stand with me as we sing our invitation hymn, softly and tenderly, and we'll sing just the first verse.